The Whispering Thaw. In the winter of 1956, Moscow felt like a city made of iron and ice. 13-year-old Pavel walked through the Red Square, his boots crunching on the frozen snow. High above him, the giant bronze statues of the great leader stared down with cold, unmoving eyes. Pavel always felt small beneath them, as if the shadows of the past were heavy enough to touch. He hurried home, clutching a loaf of bread, sensing that the air was thicker than usual today. Inside their cramped apartment, Pavel's father, Zoran, was nervously polishing his shoes. Zoran was a technician at the Kremlin, and tonight was the final night of the 20th Congress. He didn't speak much, but his hands trembled. "It is a late session, Pavel," Zoran whispered, looking at the door. "A secret session. The world might look different when the sun rises." Pavel didn't understand, but he felt the spark of a mystery. After Zoran left, Pavel's grandmother, Clara, sat by the radio. She pulled an old, tattered photo album from under a floorboard. Many pages had faces cut out of them, empty silhouettes where friends and family used to be. "The great winter has lasted a long time, Pavel," Clara said softly, her eyes reflecting the glowing dial of the radio. "We learned to forget so we could survive. But tonight, someone is finally remembering." Deep inside the Kremlin, the Great Hall was filled with a suffocating silence. Nikita, the new chairman, stood behind the heavy wooden podium. He didn't look like a giant. He looked like an ordinary man in a plain suit. He cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. The air seemed to freeze as he opened a folder containing a speech that no one expected, a speech that would tear down the myths of the man who came before him. As Nikita began to speak, the words hit the audience like physical blows. He spoke of the cult of personality and the crimes committed in the dark. Among the delegates, Oleg and Darya sat frozen in their seats. Oleg's mouth hung open in shock, while Darya gripped the arms of her chair so hard her knuckles turned white. The silence of decades was being shattered by the voice of a single man. Back at home, Pavel couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the distant lights of the Kremlin flickering against the black sky. He imagined the words traveling through the stone walls, escaping into the streets like a hidden wind. He picked up his pencil and began to draw, not the giant statues, but the tiny, brave birds that nested in the eaves of the buildings, waiting for the spring. It was nearly dawn when the door creaked open. Zoran walked in, his coat dusted with light snow. He looked exhausted, but the tension in his shoulders was gone. Pavel jumped up from his bed. His father didn't say a word. He simply walked over and hugged Pavel with a strength he hadn't shown in years. It was the hug of a man who was no longer afraid of his own shadow. Clara joined them, clutching a kettle of hot tea. Zoran looked at her and nodded slowly. "He told them, Mother," Zoran whispered. "He told the truth about the camps, the lists, and the fear. The statues are just hollow metal now." Clara sank into her chair, a single tear tracking through the wrinkles on her cheek. The secrets that had kept her heart frozen were finally starting to melt. The next morning, the city felt different. Near the school, Pavel stopped to watch a group of workers. A man named Stepan was high up on a ladder, draped in heavy ropes. They weren't building something new. They were draped a massive canvas sheet over a portrait of the former leader. "The wind is changing, kid," Stepan called down with a tired smile. The iron grip of the past was loosening, one rope at a time. Years later, Pavel would remember 1956 as the year the thaw began. He stood in a park where the giant statues had once been removed, leaving only empty stone plinths that were now covered in green moss. He held his own son's hand as the sun finally broke through the gray Moscow clouds. The shadows were still there, but they were just shadows now, and the light was much, much stronger.